The main event can make or break a show. It doesn't matter how good the undercard is, if the main event's a stinker, the entire event can be tainted.
Here on Main Event Maniacs, we will revisit some of the most memorable main events in sports entertainment history, good and bad, across various promotions and eras of professional wrestling. I'm Jay and happy to be joined by the jackhammer to my spear, good friend and co host Brian.
Thanks, Jay. Today, we are discussing what is arguably the biggest match in WCW Monday Nitro history. That is the night Bill Goldberg went over Hulk Hogan for the WCW Championship for free.
For free,
For free.
in the Georgia Dome, July 1998. I'm so glad we're finally getting to this one, man. It was one of the first ones we put on the list when we started the Main Event Maniacs here on the Juice Box. And Brian, I got thoughts and I got memories of this one, man. So we're gonna go strolling down old memory lane here with this. But I remember the build into this so big because it happened in the summer in between my junior and senior year of college. And the friends I watched wrestling with had mostly scattered for the summer, so we weren't doing our usual all get together watch it. So I was left to my own devices with no text messaging, no internet really to get up with anybody. I had to watch this, think about it, and wait till everybody came back to school a month and a half later to really, get into it and talk about it. But I was so into this, man. I taped it on my VCR that night
Yep.
and rewatched it. I think somewhere I still have that VHS cassette with this match on it. And we'll never forget watching this and how big of a deal it was that Goldberg beat Hogan and then it was on free television.
Yeah, so this would have been 1998 would have been my second year of college, not first year of college in Mankato, where I ended up. That's my alma mater, and my now wife and I had been dating for approximately 4 months at this point, and in that time, I mentioned we'd always have these pizza bake-offs and stuff for pay-per-views, right? Not for Monday Nitros, that wasn't a big thing. But I do know that I was over at my in-laws' house for this show because her father was a big Goldberg fan and her brother is a huge wrestling fan and we'd watch wrestling all the time together. So that's where I was watching this show. I still can't believe that they gave this away for free on Monday Nitro. Like, this just seemed really out of place because
Yeah.
Hogan was dilly-dallying with Dennis Rodman at the time and in a feud with DDP and Karl Malone. It was the NBA playoffs and all this other crap was going on, and it was just kind of like they just threw this in there. It was just really weird.
And depending on which version of Eric Bischoff telling the story you get is why they did what they did. But the most consistent thing is they were so consumed with beating WWE in Monday night ratings. And they had beat them for a long time and then had started to lose to them again that they were like, we got to pull out all the stops. And what's the one thing we've got? And everybody will tell you that the one guy that really got through. Now, in retrospect, we all kind of respect the luchadors and what they were and stuff, but the one guy that really got through when that big run of NWO and all that was happening was Goldberg. He got over organically with the crowd and they built the whole thing out of the streak, and we're going to talk about all that. They said, hey, we got to put the thing on this guy. And what's wild to me, Brian, is watching it then and then rewatching it now. This very familiar feeling began to come over me. It was like I was watching Toronto and Sky Dome and Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan when I was a kid. And the same dynamic plays out in the long run as well. They find this hot thing. We're going to put the thing on him because our star may be going off to do other stuff. And then all of a sudden we realize, whoop, there's not a whole lot of steak to that sizzle anymore. Let's bring back the guy that we know.
Well, and here's the really weird part is like he had been wrestling pretty much jobber guys and a few like mid-card names. And then he got the title, the US title from Raven, which was really his biggest feud. Like him and Perry Saturn was a great match. And then him and Raven was a great match. And he got that US title. And then like within a month, 2 months, they said, yeah, let's just put the world title on him now. Yeah, it was just kind of like, wow. It just seemed like it came out of nowhere. Like, I get you want to go when it's hot, But like you mentioned before, WCW had done the 83 weeks. That was over now. Now they're going back and forth on who is winning the ratings each week, and they wanted to pop a huge number, which they did, obviously, for this. But just really missed an opportunity there. But again, you listen to Russo, you listen to Bischoff, you listen to them. It wasn't about the pay-per-views at that point. It was all about
Yeah.
ratings and advertising money and everything else that they were going after. The
Yeah.
pay-per-views were a nice bonus, so they didn't really care if it went well or bombed.
They had not figured out how to do what we know PLEs as now, which
Yeah.
you basically subscribe to a service and you just get them, or they're part of a package or something. They were still doing the old model, but they knew that was going away, and they didn't care because the TV money was where the weekly shows was where the money was for the guys and for the networks and the teams, and the networks cared about those ratings. And
Yes.
they wanted to see those things. And so when you're running a television show, and these are television shows, we bang on Vince Russo for a lot of things, but he's never wrong about this. Is that these are television shows. You have to do things on television shows that not only hook people, but keep them hooked and keep them coming back. And,
Yes.
and it's easy to go in retrospect, like, oh gosh, this should have been a pay per view, and it most certainly should have. I want to say that clearly, but I get why they decided, hey, we got to do this. To what you were saying though about he was a U.S. title champion for a very short time, and then they just elevated him all that. That's the thing that I guess I just bumped up against because I always felt like the guy in the U.S. title spot, the guy in the Intercontinental title spot, were guys that could carry the mid card to the next level. They were the top end of the mid card, and they had to kind of earn and work their way to that world title spot. And the dynamics of that have changed so much. Nowadays, guys come in, they win the world title, then they bump down, they win the TV title. It's all over the place now. But when we were coming through, that was sort of the progression of stuff. And when you couldn't get the world champion on every show, at least you had the Intercontinental champion or the U.S. champion. And they, I'm talking about guys that worked all the time doing, wearing those belts. And I felt like this was part of a lineage of a time when we just started disrespecting those belts in a serious way.
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. And to me, like, if you want to put a title on Goldberg and you put the U.S. title on him, that's fine, because he still is a mid card talent, right? I mean, he's going through the streak. People are getting really behind him. They should have pushed him a little longer, I think, with the U.S. Championship, but it is what it is. This is what happens, and we just got to get with it.
Exactly. So I think it's time to get into the build-up. How did we get to the point where it was Goldberg versus Hogan, right?
Well, Hogan will tell you it was his idea.
I'm sure he will. Him and The Rock both had this idea at the same
Yes,
time.
exactly. Bill Goldberg's quote-unquote undefeated streak began on September 22nd, 1997, when he defeated Hugh Morris to everyone's surprise on Monday Nitro.
How can you get over on Hugh Morris so easily?
Well, that was the thing. Like, Hugh Morris had been on TV for a while, and he didn't win a ton of matches. He won and lost some. But to have this guy nobody knows who is come out and just beat him, everyone figured this would be some kind of squash match for Hugh Morris.
Not
right?
just beat him, squash him.
Yeah,
We
really
should
squash him.
emphasize that Goldberg's matches were squash events.
Yes. So Goldberg was an unknown at this time, and even Tony Schiavone didn't know how to react when he won this match. The crowd ate it up each week as Goldberg would come out, defeat another opponent in swift and dominating fashion. His first major program saw Goldberg defeat Steve Mongo McMichael, rest in peace, at Starrcade 1997. Do you remember what that was for?
No, I don't remember what that was for.
He wrestled him for Mongo's Super Bowl championship ring.
I did not remember that was the stipulation on that.
Because they were both football players.
That is why, yeah, one way more successful than the
yeah.
other, but
Obviously.
sure. But yeah, that hats off to Mongo. By the way, he did a heck of a job in that match. In his career, he was a good performer.
He was a good performer, absolutely. As Goldberg's streak grew, he was finally given a chance at a title, and on April 20th, he defeated Raven to capture the WCW United States Championship.
Yeah, can I just stop on that for just a sec, though? People go back and find that match, and you will never speak ill of Raven again if you watch him carry Bill Goldberg through that match.
Big time.
And it should give you a tip of the hat of how good Raven is as a performer and what he could do. Because, no offense to Bill Goldberg, he would tell you he was limited in scope as what he could do at the time, and what people would let him do because he was very unsafe at that point. And Raven really put him over in a major way.
And I would do you one better, and I would say go back and watch Goldberg's match against Perry Saturn right before this
Yeah,
one.
that's a good point.
Because Perry Saturn made him look like $1,000,000 and really gave Goldberg his first real contest. You can say McMichael, but in the scope of things, I would say Perry Saturn was the first one.
Mongo was a football player that became a decent enough wrestler to get by. Perry Saturn is a wrestler. And he knows how to, in spite of every other athletic thing he can do, he's a wrestler. Raven's a wrestler. And yeah, you're right. Perry Saturn was another guy that could make you look like $1,000,000 when you were worth about 250.
100%. After taking on the likes of Conan and Kurt Hennig, Goldberg coined the phrase, "Who's next?" which he would say after every victory. The fans went crazy for Goldberg and his streak, and finally on WCW Thunder in July, Commissioner J.J. Dillon announced that Hollywood Hogan was next.
That was huge, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that whole "who's next" bit, whoever came up with that, and again, depending on the day, is who takes credit for it and stuff. He delivered that perfectly. It was like part horror movie villain, but part hero too. And Goldberg doesn't have a lot of presence and talent on the mic and things, but he could do that, and people went bonkers for it.
Well, it was the whole approach too, because he would turn to the hard camera and he would look at it and say, "Who's next?" Or he'd walk up to the corner camera and look right in the lens and say, "Who's next?" Like he delivered it perfectly.
Yeah,
and fans just gobbled that up.
Yeah, 100%. And again, with a guy like that, you got to give him one thing to do, because this is the one thing that WCW got right that WWF maybe indulged Jim Hellwig a little too much with the Ultimate Warrior, because his promos were legendary for being out of this world and out of everybody's mind. Chris Jericho does a heck of an impression of them if you want to go look at it. Goldberg didn't do that stuff. He didn't talk. He snarled. He came out the fireworks. He would grunt at you, and then he'd go, "Who's next?" And the way he just buried people, you'd go, "Man, I don't know, but they're screw whoever it is."
Absolutely. Let's talk about Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Now, he's had the better part of, like, from 1994 all the way up until this time. He's been champion for probably 90% of the time, would you say?
Oh, yeah. Easily.
Easily. Anyway, he's in the middle of his fourth WCW World title. I should say not the middle. He's at the end of his fourth WCW World title reign, having won the title from Randy Savage on April 20th, 1998, after splitting the NWO into two factions. We've talked about this before, the NWO Wolfpack and the NWO Hollywood. Hogan was deep into a feud with Diamond Dallas Page and Karl Malone when the match was finally made. With the Bash at the Beach just days away, we're talking a week away from this, basically 6 days. Bash at the Beach, Hogan now had to shift gears from his tag match with Dennis Rodman versus Page Malone and try to tackle the elephant in the room that was Bill Goldberg.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I am curious about. If you want to do the tag match at Bash at the Beach, fine, because that's going to be the big main event and stuff like that. Why not move that up to this spot and then do Goldberg Hogan at Bash? Or just wait to the next big event? Why the rush? And it can't just be because it was Atlanta and the Georgia Dome. It can't just be that reason. I don't accept that as the only reason they did this.
My guess is that Dennis Rodman wasn't available.
Now that I could believe, because of everybody you just mentioned in that last sentence, that's the most wild card of all of them.
Yeah, and we know that Rodman and Malone Page and Malone were available because they appear in this match. But Rodman was one of those you can't count on him for anything guys at the time. I mean, he was pretty loaded up on all sorts of bad influences. Yeah. And so my guess is he wasn't available. He couldn't make it. I have a feeling that if possible, they might have upped this match to this show because it was such a big show, and then pushed Goldberg Hogan to the main event. But Goldberg also had his feud with Kurt Hennig. He was wrestling Kurt Hennig at the pay-per-view, and that U.S. title match would now become a world title match. But that's kind of where it was. The whole thing, like I said already, it just was weird timing. But here we are. We're going to have to talk about it.
Oh, yeah. And let's set it up. We said July the 6th. We're coming off of the 4th of July weekend. They've already got the Georgia Dome booked, all right, which you have to book long in advance to be able to get. They've already sold 30,000 of the 40,000 tickets available before they announced the main event on that Thunder. And then after that, of course, it explodes. They sell it out. I mean, there's no paper in the room now, man. We don't need any of that. You can send that to the house. It's going to be huge. And this card had a lot of other matches for reasons, as we'll say, including a U.S. title match that we'll talk about in hour two of the 3-hour show. So they milked the heck out of this thing, all right? But again, it's Atlanta, Georgia. It's Goldberg's, quote, hometown because he played for the Falcons and all that stuff. He's kind of built in Atlanta. He's sort of known there. And they pull out all the stops. We get the full commentary team. We got Tony Schiavone, Mike Tenay, Bobby Heenan, and Larry Zbyszko, all from the forgotten part of that team, but he's there. And they're all in tuxedos. They're doing the whole nine. You know, they're making this a big deal. And I got to be honest, like watching this, it sort of was a throwback to when WCW started to take off on TBS and the way that they would do some of their shows, particularly the Saturday Night's Main Event, every now and then would just get like a big lift or like a Clash of the Champions is what this felt like, is because we're bringing out all the stops. It's going to be this big of a big event for us because Clash of the Champions was like the free pay-per-view version that WCW offered us growing up. I had forgotten what all was on this card until I went back and revisited. And I watched the whole episode, Brian. I don't know if you did or not, but I watched the whole darn thing.
I did not. I did watch a couple of the matches, and then I skipped quite a few because I don't want to watch Scott Putski versus Scotty Riggs. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're going to get into that. Yeah, so let me run through this card real quick, all right? Booker T beat Dean Malenko to retain the WCW TV Championship. This is actually a pretty decent match. It's okay. Canyon and Raven ended in a no contest where they basically wasted everyone's time, which was sad because they're both better than that. Putski defeated Riggs. I have nothing else to offer on that. Chris Jericho beat Ultimo Dragon by DQ to retain the WCW Cruiserweight belt, and it's a really good match, actually, and a good feud.
And, the Dean Malenko is the reason for the DQ because he and Jericho were in the middle of a feud, which had the classic man of 1,004 holds reading the list.
Yes.
Part of it, that was part of that feud. Good stuff.
Yeah, always good stuff. Chavo Guerrero Jr. beat Johnny Swinger, sure. The Public Enemy, also known as Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock, beat Alex Wright and the Disco Inferno because I guess Glenn Gilbert needed to get a paycheck. Yep, exactly. Then in the middle of all of that, we decide Goldberg's got to go through Scott Hall. He's got to defend the U.S. title before he gets a shot at Hogan. So if he loses this, he doesn't get the shot at Hogan. Okay, so less than 5 minutes, he blows through Scott Hall, which is a terrible use of both of those guys' time. But okay, it's a teaser. Juventud Guerrero beat Psychosis. That was a really fun match to watch. I would recommend going and watching that one.
And don't recommend this next one.
No, the Giant did things to Jim Duggan inside of 2 minutes that are borderline elder abuse, and that's all I'm gonna say. Diamond Dallas Page with Karl Malone beat Jim Neidhart because we had to introduce that they were there so that we could bring them out later. So they couldn't just, promo talk them. No, we got to let them do things. Then Lex Luger and Sting with Kevin Nash and Conan because they're part of NWO Wolfpack. Is everybody confused yet? Defeated the team of Kidman and Sick Boy, which that's a hell of a lead up into your main event. Of all of that, there's maybe 2.5 of those I would tell you to spend any time on, and one of which is not the U.S. title match. And I got to know, why do we have to defend the U.S. title and then put the U.S. title on the line in this match? Because this is a title for title match. They make a big deal out of that.
Well, here's the thing. Scott Hall, this is a returning Scott Hall. He had been gone for a while, and I guess probably just to fill time and give Scott a match, they did this thing because the match was already booked. Like, Hogan couldn't get out of it. It's not like he can just, oh nope, well, he has to beat Scott Hall first. That's what he tries to say, but either way, the match was already sanctioned and booked, so it's going to happen regardless. But I think they just need to fill some time and give Scott Hall a role on the show because he's back finally, and this is what they did. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a huge waste of time. Let's just be honest. But it gives you a tease of Goldberg before we finally come out and we get the whole thing. And I've seen the Goldberg entrance. And you and I used to joke, before we started doing this show, that in the latter versions of the Goldberg entrance, it just got longer and longer. It was like he was walking from his home to get to the
Yes.
stage. He would blow up before you hit the ring. This was the more shorter version, but Hogan milks the absolute hell out of this walk down the aisle, man. It lasts almost as long as the match does.
This was before he started headbutting the door and cutting himself before a match. But it's still, I like the whole security walking him to the ring thing was
Why does Bill Goldberg need
dull.
security?
Right? Like he beats everybody in a minute and a half. What does he need a security detail taking him to the ring for? Like nobody's gonna
Yeah.
attack him in the back. Whatever. I never ever liked the entrance like this. I always hated the walk from the back entrance thing for any wrestler. It was annoying. But whatever. They wanted to make it a big deal. So that's what we get.
We do, and then we get into the match proper, as it were. And we kind of get some of the staples here of the Hogan match when he's going to drop one, right? Like we get the we're going to do tests of strength. We're going to fool around. We're going to let Hogan get up a little bit. And this version of that was the much slower version of it through the years before he and Goldberg actually like do stuff. And I got to say, they did more in this match than I remembered. I remembered it being more or less a squash, but it wasn't in retrospect. Hogan went on for a while with him.
What I like is Hogan tried to actually like put wrestling holds on him, like headlocks.
How long did you think he worked on this
takedowns.
beforehand?
Oh
Like
my
5
God.
minutes before?
No, they called it in the ring. They called it in the ring. That's all Hogan does. He doesn't script anything. But I thought they did a good job with this for what it was. Hogan looked strong against Goldberg for a while. You got to see him use the weight belt and whip on Goldberg. Goldberg looked vulnerable for a little bit of this match, so they did a good job of making it look like now he's in the big time. He's wrestling the big wrestlers now, right?
Yeah.
He's not going to be able to just go through them like he's used to. He's going to have to put up a fight. And that's, I think, the goal of this. Make Hogan look good, yet still sell for Goldberg, and in the end, lose the match. And so I liked it. I thought the match was pretty good. It wasn't a classic by any means, right?
Oh, no.
But I think what their goal was to set up a Hogan Goldberg rematch down the line, which never ever happens. But
Yeah.
I think they made Goldberg look strong. They made Hogan look strong, and with the interference at the end that didn't actually work, it makes it look like Hogan lost cleanly, right? Even though we had guys trying to interfere on his behalf, he did lose cleanly, but also he was distracted, so that might have cost them the match too. So they give outs, right? And I think they did a good job with the booking of this match, and I think it went over pretty well. And in the end, everyone gets what they wanted, right? Everyone wanted Hogan to lose the belt, and they wanted Goldberg to win.
Right, and we gave Goldberg stuff to do in this match too. Like he breaks out
Absolutely.
doing some drop kicks that he's never done before. He's doing some holds of his own, which is you don't expect that out of Bill Goldberg. They go back and forth a good bit, and just when it looks like it's all going down, and of course it's all going to hell because everybody coming to the ring. Here come Karl Malone and DDP to save the day. And I gotta say, I'll give Karl Malone credit. At this point, his back and knees are completely shot from years of basketball. He does a pretty decent diamond cutter. Like that was not terrible. Like that, you could tell he had worked pretty hard on that to get that spot in on the outside of the ring, which sets up Goldberg to do his final two moves: that spear and that jackhammer.
Yeah, and give it a lot of credit here. You got two athletes on this show, right? Because the Giant and Duggan match, they had Kevin Green come down.
Yeah.
Man, that guy stunk.
Ooh.
But whatever. Malone was one of the few people that they pulled from a different universe who looked really good in the WCW days. He
Yeah.
did a good job. He actually took it seriously. He was a huge wrestling fan, and he worked hard with Diamond Dallas Page to actually learn how to work and wrestle in the match. And so I give a lot of props to Karl Malone. He did do a good diamond cutter, and he looked good out there. He was pretty buff at the time too. Like
He's a big dude. Yeah, I mean, he's a power
stood
forward.
out right next to he stood out right next to those wrestlers and didn't look like he didn't fit in. He looked well.
He's muscular. He's a big guy. I mean, he looked good out there. And again, they did a good job of setting him up. And I gotta say, I give a lot to Tony Schiavone for selling us on this too, and I think everybody at the commentary team is doing a great job. Heenan is really pushing hard because
Oh yeah.
he's always hated Hulk Hogan. Now he gets to be the good guy to hate Hulk Hogan, which is funny, but because he's such a heel. But he's hating on him. But Tony Schiavone has had some great calls in his day. But when they do the 1, 2, 3 after the jackhammer and the oh hell yeah, and just that straight Georgia redneck growl that he has from time to time, I'll never forget that. I laughed out loud at that when it happened. I still laugh to this day, and I mean for a good way. I'm like, yeah, that's about how you should sell that. Like, because that's really good. And what you know about this is nobody's in the back telling him that. That's straight Tony just doing Tony.
Absolutely. Tony Schiavone doesn't get enough credit for being such an amazing announcer. He, up in the final years, you could tell he wasn't into it, but up until then, he sold matches that shouldn't be sold. Like,
Oh no.
he made you invested in a match that sucks because he's great storyteller and he knows how to push the right inflection at the right time. He knows how to give the right moment its due. And that's why I've always loved Tony Schiavone. And for me, even though I grew up with WWF and, Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura and all that, Tony Schiavone is what I call the announcer of my youth. Because in my high school and college years, he was the guy I loved listening to all the time. And that's why I became a WCW fan over the WWF product, because guys like Tony Schiavone made me care about the match.
Well, Tony's a sports broadcaster. It's
Right.
all those years of doing baseball and doing football and things like that, but really doing baseball. And when baseball has its big crescendo moments, you need to be able to sell that on radio. And he's a radio guy, and he just knows how to do that. And I think he treated this the same way, and it was a big moment. It was a big deal. We were putting the belt on Goldberg. He's the hottest star in the business right now, particularly for WCW. And it's going to be all this great, momentum going forward. And then it's not so much as we'll get to it. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that. So WCW ended up running a tournament for that vacated U.S. title, and Bret Hart beat Diamond Dallas Page for that in Salt Lake City, Utah. I kind of feel like that's a mistake, but okay, fine. We got to do something with Bret Hart because we got him on the payroll. I feel like Diamond deserved that, but oh well. Goldberg was going to defend this over the next month. He beat several NWO people in a battle royal at Road Wild. He actually did get a great match with DDP at Halloween Havoc. Probably one of the best Goldberg championship matches that there is to know.
Absolutely.
It's great. We might have to get to that one day. But we got some other Halloween Havoc business before we get to that. I'm looking at you, Great Muda and Terry Funk. But we'll talk about that later. But as we all know, if you listen to our previous episode, that streak came to a big grinding halt in Starrcade 1998 at the end of the year when he lost to Kevin Nash and a cattle prod and about 40 other people. And then Nash turns around and lays down for Hogan on the following Nitro to start 99. And really the drop began at that point, So the before we get into, the end of Goldberg and all that kind of stuff, like, they put the belt on this guy, and I keep going back to this because I think the comparison's apt. And just like with the Ultimate Warrior, they realized pretty quickly, and scene. Like, we don't have anywhere else to go with this guy because we don't have any other good heels for him to beat. And the best thing we've got is DDP, and he's over. So we're gonna let him beat him, but now what? I don't know if it was the right moment to do it, particularly if the way they played it out and stuff, but goodness gracious, man, they didn't do this guy any favors as champion.
No, and they tried all sorts of things. They had him wrestle Sting, they had him wrestle, all these guys, and the problem was that their top heels kept getting hurt, and so
their top heels were all old. That's the problem.
Yeah, 100%. So they had to feed him people that probably wouldn't want your face champion wrestling because half the crowd's going to vote or cheer for the other guy, but. It happened. Is what it is. I think the problem is that because they did that to him and because he didn't have strong heels to work with, people got tired of him. And they felt that they needed to make a change because he wasn't getting as over as he was before he got the title. And that's all on them. Like, they booked it wrong. They really did. And if you don't have a good heel, turn someone else heel. Like you had this stupid ass Wolfpack going, right? Like Kevin Nash was a face
Yeah,
when he
at that
wrestled
point.
against Goldberg here. So at that point, you had Sting, DDP, and Kevin Nash wrestling Goldberg in big events, all faces against Goldberg. So either turn Goldberg heel, which they wouldn't, or build one of these other guys as a face or a heel for him to wrestle. It was just really
Yeah.
poorly done. His whole run was just a shame.
It just goes to show that, and this is so much a mark of WCW at the time, was they would have a great idea to a point, and then there was no second act. There was no way to get out of it. It's like the front end of this album is great. Then you flip it over and it's a bunch of B-side duds. Like there's not a hit amongst you. And you got to have something in there. And again, I blame them like you do. They didn't build up another good monster heel. They didn't have anybody else they could feed back to him or that they wanted to, and they just didn't do a good job of managing that dynamic. And then when they finally did have him lose, and maybe it was the right time, maybe it wasn't. Again, we debated that already. They did it with the dumbest thing possible, and then they just
Hmm.
undermined the whole thing. And then, as we know, Goldberg went on to do nothing again. So the official streak is 173 and 0, but of course we know that's totally exaggerated. I mean, who knows what it really was? But they made a thing out of that, and that was great. But he would not hold a title again until the 2003 when
In WWE, yeah.
WWE had bought the WCW. That is insane to think about, man, that this guy was so over, and then it would be 5 years before they ever put another belt on him.
Well, and some of that was his problem. He injured himself on a run that was supposed to put the title back on him.
Right, right.
Uh, so that didn't help him any. And then you got Booker changes galore happening in 99, 2000, and 2001. So there was no consistency to do anything with him once he came back. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a cluster. WCW was a cluster at the time, and they just didn't know what to do at all. The match that should have happened that ended Goldberg's streak should have been Hollywood Hogan rematch.
I
It
agree.
should have been Goldberg versus Hogan. And instead, they let Kevin Nash beat him and then drop it to Hogan with a finger poke of doom. How freaking stupid you have to be. They could have had Goldberg go over Nash at that Starrcade pay per view because the match that Hogan laid down on was at the freaking Georgia Dome. They could
Yeah.
have had the rematch of the biggest match they ever had on Nitro in the Georgia Dome and had Hogan get his one up victory and then build up to a third match.
Oh, I
They
can get
didn't.
it for you better than that. The Nash thing goes sideways. Maybe Goldberg goes over on him because it's some kind of DQ situation. Hogan gets involved, Then Hogan gets his rematch. He beats Goldberg because Nash screws Goldberg. Now you've got Goldberg and Nash to program with each other, and while Hogan carries the title for a bit before you come back at Bash at the Beach or in the summer, and Goldberg gets his third shot again. That's exactly
Yeah.
how they should have done it.
Absolutely. It was messed up. The booking, it just WCW is on the wrong path after this, and they just didn't know how to recover.
Let's be real, man. They were on the wrong path before this.
Yes,
They just had a
they had momentum.
momentary lapse of reason and into reason, and then they went right back into their nuttiness. And it's just it's a moment though, man, in wrestling, because again, nobody will ever forget where you were when Goldberg went over Hogan. And again, the novelty of it was that it was on free TV. And again, they made a lot of money in the gate and all that kind of stuff, and the ratings were massive, no doubt. But it was just a slight spark when it could have been this long fire, and that's what I think. That's what's frustrating about it, Brian, is that you and I just laid it out for 2 minutes. Like you could have had a year's worth of programming off of that,
Yeah,
and they just
easily.
blew it too fast.
Absolutely, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, well, that brings us to the end and our final bell of all of this. I think we've already done our rebook and what we think should happen and stuff like that. It's been a lot of fun revisiting this one, my friend. Though I'm glad we got to go back and talk a little WCW, and we've got more fun stuff coming up in the near future on this very show.
We do. I'm really excited. We're going to have Juice join us for one of these shows.
Can't wait.
He's a huge 1990s WCW guy, like early to mid 1990s. That is his jam. So we're going to go back in the time machine to that era and pull one out of the hat and have him come on. So I'm really excited about that. We're going to talk about a few things down the road here that I actually attended.
I know. I'm so pumped about that. And I've
I
got an
am
upcoming
super
show
excited to talk
we're
about.
in the audience for. I can't wait to get your
Yes.
perspective on that, man. Of course, you folks, you can find this show in this very feed, the Juice Box, from time to time. Feel free to connect with G Springsteen on Twitter X at GC Steen or Instagram at GC Wrestling Closet. You can also subscribe on YouTube at GC Steen and wherever you're finding the podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, YouTube. Give us a review, give us a like, share the show on your socials because it helps spread the word, not only about Main Event Maniacs, but all the great stuff that the Juice Box has got going, not just the regular Juice Box, but all of his shows where he brings in other people. They do the picks, they do, different roundtable discussions. It's a great place for wrestling fans to get your content.
That's right. And if you want to follow myself or Jay, you can do so on X. Jay is at JRan here, and I'm Brian Thomas 878. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the episodes, suggestions for future episodes. Is there a main event you'd like us to cover? We're always open, especially if you want us to cover like ECW. Jay and I are going to admit right now, we weren't big ECW guys.
Nope.
We never really watched it. So if there's a specific main event match, now it has to be the main event, that you'd like us to cover from ECW, we're always game to go back and watch these things. So hit us up, let us know.
Same goes for ROH, anything else that we can find access to. And we promise we are going to get to some AEW sometime very soon. Brian and I both like that promotion, and we think there's some stuff even in its 5-year inception that is already Main Event Maniac worthy. So we will get to that very soon. Until next time, thank you for listening to the show, and this has been your Main Event.
It's a war zone, a Legends Hall of Fame. Main Event Maniacs. Main Event Maniacs.